Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. In this series, we're going to learn using lambda expressions. Now, before starting, we'll have to make sure that we know a few things. Lambda expressions was introduced in Java 1.8. So before moving on, make sure that you are using JDK 1.8 or above. Now, the next thing that we need to know is functional interface. Now, you might know that one of the ways of implementing an interface is using anonymous class. Now, we can also implement an interface using lambda expressions, but that interface has to be a functional interface. So what is a functional interface? A functional interface is an interface that has exactly one abstract method. Now bear in mind that you can have as many default and static methods in an interface, in a functional interface as a one, but it will have to have exactly one abstract method for it to be a functional interface. Now, as you can see, I have an interface and it has only one abstract method. So I can say it is a functional interface. I can even use this annotation functional interface. Now, if I want, I can say, let's say, default void fn, and let's give it an implementation, let's say something. Now it has a default method, it doesn't really matter. Now it can have a static method if it wants, and let's say something. So these two methods doesn't count because one is a default method and one is a static method, so it doesn't really matter. But if the moment I try to put another abstract method in this interface, it gives me an error. And the reason being, there are two abstract methods in this interface, and therefore this interface can no longer be treated as a functional interface. Now, prior to Java 1.8, we used to use anonymous classes to implement an interface. Now we can use lambda expressions to implement functional interface. Now let's try to create an instance for this test interface. So let's say test interface is equal to, now here we'll be using the lambda expressions to give the implementation. So the first thing that we need to do is copy this block of parameters. Okay, so I'll just copy it and paste it here. Then I'll be using minus and angular bracket and then set of curly braces. That's it. I've just used lambda expressions to implement this functional interface. And within these two curly braces, within this block, I'll have to provide the implementation details for this method right here, which is print name. So let's say I just want to print something. Let's say I'll be printing my name. Okay. Now, if I try to call this method, if I try to use this method using this instance, I'll just have to say test interface dot print name. So let's give it my name and let's try to run it. Now you can see it runs successfully and it is also printing my name. So that's how we use lambda expression to implement a functional interface. Now the notation that you are seeing we have used here is known as the omega arrow. Now if you are coming from a JavaScript background, then you have probably seen it being used in JavaScript, but in JavaScript we use the fat arrow notation, and in Java we use this omega notation. Now we didn't even provide the name of the function for which we provided the implementation. So how does it know this is the implementation for this exact method? I mean, it is pretty simple. If you see that a functional interface has only one abstract method, so whichever implementation that I provide must be for that abstract method. Now we can do some modifications to even further compact this code. Now we are using only one line of code, and that is why we can get rid of these two braces and it's just going to work fine. But if it has multiple lines, more than one lines, it is not going to compile. As you can see, we're getting an error. So in the scenario when we have more than one line, we'll have to put these two curly braces back on. So anyway, for our implementation, it only has only one line. So I'm just going to remove these two curly braces and put it in one line. Another thing we can do is remove this type name from this parameter, and it still is going to work just fine. Now, since we have only one parameter in this method signature, what we can do is get rid of these two brackets. So I'll just remove this and it is still going to work just fine. But let's say we have more than one parameter. Let's say we have another parameter, let's say name2 and name2, and provide another dummy name, let's say. And if now we want to, if we try to get rid of these two brackets, it is not going to work. Okay. So when we have only one parameter, so let's remove this. We have only one parameter. So in that case, what we can do is get rid of these two brackets, and it is still just going to work fine. Now, so far, the example that we're looking at, this method doesn't return anything. Now, what if this method returns something? How do we process that? How do we store that? Let's try to see such an example. So I'll just go ahead and remove this code. So let's say this interface has a method and it returns an int. The name of the method is sum. It takes two integers as parameters and it should return the sum of these two integers. Now we'll be implementing this interface. So test interface is equal to, then first thing we do is copy these parameters. So I'll just go ahead and copy this, then omega notation, and then do curly braces. Now what I need to do is return the sum of these two variables. So I'll just return a plus b, and let's try to see if it works. So test interface dot sum, let's say 10 and 20, and the output should be 30. And as you can see, we are getting 30 as our output. And now if we want, we can remove this block of curly brace and put it in one line. Now what we need to do is omit this return statement. Now what it does is, whatever we write after this, whatever comes after this omega notation is going to get returned by this implementation. And that's why we don't need to use the return statement here. And if I try to run it once again, it is still going to work. And also we can omit this int in from here, and it's still going to work. So now we have a basic understanding of how Lambda expressions work. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you learned something today. We'll see you in the next video.